In my career, I have produced events with bomb threats, fur police, armed security guards. I have brought speakers to Australia who had literal death threats directed at them. None of those events generated as much controversy as this one.
As an immigrant, I'm doing the job that nobody wants to do.
That women are not allowed to succeed in these fields.
And so the agenda apparently is not protection.
It's literally a pay gap.
March 2019, Sydney Town Hall and Plenary Theatre in Melbourne. The #Feminist event. Roxane Gay and Christina Hoff Sommers. On paper, a blockbuster. Two of the most prominent feminist voices in the English-speaking world on one stage in Australia. We sold thousands of tickets across both cities. What actually happened over the 2 nights and the weeks that followed ended up being written about in New York Magazine, and it is without question the most complicated event I have ever been involved in. This is the full story from the inside. To understand the event, I need to tell you where it actually came from, because it didn't start with a business calculation. It started with a personal moment. I was at a social setting, nothing to do with work, and at some point in the conversation, I referred to myself as a feminist in the sense that I believe in equal rights for women, the dictionary definition of the word. Someone there scoffed, "How can you call yourself that?" And I realized at that moment I had wandered into something that I didn't fully understand. The word feminism, a word with a clear definition, had acquired multiple meanings and multiple camps, and carrying it would become a political act. Saying it out loud put you somewhere on a map I did not know that existed. That experience stayed with me, and it eventually became the seed for this event. The culture of 2018 and 2019 was at full pitch. #MeToo had reshaped conversations about gender and power. Intersectionality was no longer an academic term. It was a frontline position. And feminism itself had fractured into multiple camps. Increasingly, they wouldn't stand each other. I saw an opportunity to do what I had always done. Put people who shouldn't be in a room together, not to declare a winner, to create crazy debates. I wanted to create genuine dialogue. Roxane Gay, a professor, author, cultural critic, self-described bad feminist, one of the defining voices of intersectional progressive feminism. Christina Hoff Sommers, a philosopher, a self-styled factual feminist, a classical liberal who had built a following critiquing what she saw as the excesses of modern feminist ideology. Two feminists, radically different frameworks, both credible, both with real audiences. I call the event #Feminist, not a debate, a conversation about what the word actually means in 2019 and why two people who both claim it can be so completely at odds. We sold thousands of tickets across Sydney and Melbourne. I felt like a genius. I was not. Here's something I have not said publicly before, but I'm comfortable saying this because Roxane Gay has effectively said it herself. In the same Sydney Morning Herald interview where she called Christina Hoff Sommers a white supremacist, she was asked, "Why are you doing this event?" Her answer?
Was it certainly a pitch and a project that you were immediately interested in, or was this one of those ones that perhaps you had to think about a bit before agreeing to do?
Well, it came to me through my speaking agent, and this is work. So for me, it was about compensation. The compensation made it worth my while. I didn't actually know who she was.
She wasn't wrong about that. The gap was significant. It is part why this event ended up losing money. I'm not saying this to relitigate the booking. Speaker fees are what they are. Both fees were agreed upon upfront. The event was a commercial loss. The ideas were worth having. I hold both of those things at the same time. Now, I've been producing events in Australia for a very long time. When we announce a tour, particularly a high-profile intellectual event like this, we get approached. Journalists want to cover it, prominent figures want to host it, who's who in Australian media reaches out. For this event, that didn't really happen. 2 months out, I started looking for a host. Normally, this is not a difficult problem. For this event, every prominent female journalist or a commentator I approach, everyone with the kind of profile and credibility to host a conversation of this weight, politely declined. Every single one. I was genuinely confused. I couldn't understand what was happening. And then a friend of mine who already declined, a multi-award winning female journalist, someone I deeply respect, invited me for lunch. She sat across me and she explained it. She told me she would love to host this event off the record. But if she did it, if her name appeared as the host of a conversation between Roxane Gay and Christina of Sommers, she would, in all likelihood, be saying goodbye to her career in the public broadcaster she worked for. Let that land for a moment. A senior, multi-award winning journalist, someone with real authority on these exact topics, would not attach her name to a moderated public conversation between two feminists without professional consequences. That was the temperature in 2019. She was one who suggested that I host it myself, which was not something I've ever done. My role has always been behind the scenes. I produce events, I don't appear in them. But here I was, weeks out, I had no host and an event that apparently nobody credible was willing to put their name next to. In retrospect, that moment, lunch with my friend, was the clearest signal I received that this event was going to be unlike anything I had produced before. And I want to be honest, I heard the signal. I'm not sure if I understood what she was telling me. I did the event anyway, because I believed in the conversation and I believed it needed to happen. There was one other signal before the event happened. In September, roughly about 6 months before the scheduled dates, Roxane Gay gave an interview to the Sydney Morning Herald. In that interview, she called Christina of Sommers a white supremacist.
Someone like Hoff Sommers or Sommers Hoff, whichever it is, I think it's really important to push back against such dangerous views. It's not that she's conservative. I think that there's absolutely room within feminism for conservatism. There's nothing wrong with that. It's that she is a white supremacist.
Christina of Sommers is Jewish. She describes herself as a registered Democrat. You can disagree profoundly with her position on feminism. Many serious people do. But white supremacist is not a characterization that holds up to scrutiny. I was asked about this at the time. My honest response was, I was surprised she used those words. It doesn't reflect what's actually in Christina's work. But here's the thing about that interview. Roxane Gay was telling me 6 months out how she felt about sharing a stage with Christina. Not just disagreement, a moral objection. She found Christina's presence legitimately offensive. I should have had a more direct conversation with her team at this point, asked hard questions. Are you genuinely willing to engage in dialogue, or has this crossed into something where being on stage together itself is a problem for you? I didn't have that conversation with enough directness. That is on me. Sydney Town Hall, March 29, 2019. The room was full, the energy was charged, and I want to be honest, walking on to host that event, I was petrified. However, I genuinely believed in what we were trying to create. From where I was standing on that stage, here's what I saw. The audience was not balanced. The majority of the Sydney crowd had come to see Roxane Gay, which is completely understandable. She's a genuine cultural force, but it meant Christina of Sommers was performing in hostile territory from the word go. When she spoke, there were boos, hissing.
A young man, you have to.
Okay,
Surely we could have a class that shows young men how not to victimize.
You know what?
When she cited a peer review research on Campbell sexual assault, she was accused of victim blaming. The audience was not there to be challenged. They were there to have their existing views confirmed. And I was being booed too from the same section of the audience for not shutting Christina down, and when I asked a question that was perceived to be challenging to Roxane Gay. which was an interesting experience as the person who had organized the event and was trying to ensure both speakers got a fair hearing. There was one moment on stage I want to be direct about because it was the thing that most upset Roxane Gay and her team in the aftermath. At a certain point in the conversation, I turned to Roxane and asked her directly, "You have now shared the stage with Christina for the better part of an hour. Do you still believe she's a white supremacist?" I asked that question because it was the most important question in the room. Roxane Gay had publicly called Christina of Sommers a white supremacist 6 months earlier in a national newspaper. Christina was sitting right there. The audience knew the quote. And we were supposedly having a conversation about genuine dialogue across differences. That question had to be asked.
Roxane, you voiced your disappointment when one of your favorite publications, New Yorker, decided to invite, for anyone who's not sure about, he was the chairman of Breitbart News and he was instrumental in getting elected. When you were promoting this event, a journalist asked you, if you were against, how are you for being at this event with somebody who you categorize as a white supremacist? Do you actually think Christina is a white supremacist?
You meant a white wine supremacist.
No. You know, Des, when I agreed to do this event, I did not know who Christina was. And I don't say that in a mean way, it's just the truth. And I don't know that she knew who I was. It's okay. And so then the Southern Poverty Law Center emailed me and said, "Here's who this person is." And I said, oh.
What did they tell you?
They talked about a lot of your work in terms of male supremacy and some of the other things that you've done over the years. And, you know, the difference between was in the White House, and he was shaping America's political future, and he had a direct hand in what was happening today. And so there is a material difference, but, you know, I think we all make mistakes in judgment from time to time.
Gay's team later characterized this as a stunt, provoking a reaction. I characterized it as a job of the host. You don't get to call someone a white supremacist in the press and then sit on a stage with them for an hour without being asked to account for it. That's not hosting, that's enabling evasion. On stage, the dynamic was genuinely difficult. Those two women were not speaking the same language. Christina was operating in a framework of data and empirical claims. Roxane was operating in a framework of lived experience and cultural theory. Neither framework is illegitimate, but they were talking past each other and I was not doing enough as the host to bridge the gap. I can't say it helped when Roxane decided not to make eye contact with Christina or meet her backstage. The days between Sydney and Melbourne were professionally the most uncomfortable of my career. I started receiving communication from Roxane Gay's team, missed calls, text messages, and emails. The message, they were not happy with what happened in Sydney. They felt Roxane Gay had been treated unfairly. They wanted me to remove myself as the host for the Melbourne event. And then came the specific request. They wanted a journalist who had interviewed Roxane Gay a few days before the Sydney event to replace me as the host. Now, I took this seriously. I got on a call with the journalist. She was perfectly pleasant, but in the conversation, she acknowledged something significant. She didn't know who Christina of Sommers was until a few weeks ago and had never read anything by her. And she was, by her own description, a huge fan of Roxane Gay. I thought about this very carefully and I came to the conclusion that it was not fair, not to the event, not to the ticket buyers, not to her, to ask her to host this with less than 24 hours preparation for a speaker whose work she had never read, when she had already publicly expressed admiration for the other speaker on stage. I spoke to Christina about it. Her response was direct. If the proposed host was openly said she doesn't know Christina's work and a fan of Roxane, that's not a host, that's 2 against 1. Christina was right. I also reached out to Dr. Meredith Doig, a feminist academic, PhD, president of the Rational Society of Australia, one of my own mentors, as an alternative, a credible, experienced, fair choice. Gay's team rejected her. So I moderated the Melbourne event. The reporting that came after the tour, some in the same Sydney Morning Herald, misrepresented parts of what happened. I won't relate again every detail, but I'm very, very grateful to Jesse Single, whose piece in New York Magazine is the most accurate and thorough account of what actually happened. I'll link it in the description. After the tour, we had professional footage of both the nights. The plan was always to release it. That's part of what we do. The footage extends the life of the ideas, conversation, serves people who couldn't attend, and create a permanent record. Roxane Gay's team sent me a cease and desist notice to block the release. This is a matter of public record. It was reported in New York Magazine, and I want to be precise about one thing. The pre-event agreement around content and footage was contracted. Roxane Gay and her team had already signed off on those terms before the event took place. This was not an ambiguous situation. I took the legal notice seriously, went to my lawyers, and their assessment was straightforward. The claim had no real foundation. It was a pressure tactic, not a legitimate legal position. So we ignored it, and we released the footage. I have produced events where the federal police rang me about credible threats against speakers' lives. A cease and desist notice with no legal leg to stand on was not a crisis, just paperwork. I'll say this once and I'll move on. Sending legal threats to suppress footage of a public intellectual conversation on a topic you have built your career on speaking about under terms you had already agreed in writing is a position I find genuinely difficult to reconcile with any belief in open discourse. I will leave it at that. Here's my honest breakdown. Failure 1. I didn't listen clearly enough to the early signals. When every credible female journalist in Australia quietly declined to put their name to the event, that was information. When my journalist friend sat across me at lunch and explained the hosting this would cost her career, that was information. I heard it, I understood it, partially. I went ahead with an event without fully understanding what I was getting myself into. I stand by my choice. I should have used some of this information to prepare differently, to have a harder conversation earlier with everyone involved about what we were actually getting ourselves into. But I'm proud we did the event. Failure 2, the hosting decision. I had never hosted an event before like this, of this caliber. I'm a producer, I work behind the scenes. The fact that I ended up on stage was not part of the plan. It was a consequence of nobody credible being willing to take the role. Maybe I should have worked harder. I don't know. Now, what I'm not going to take responsibility for, the audience atmosphere. You can do all the marketing and set the atmosphere in a particular way, but you cannot control a room that arrives having already decided which speaker is legitimate. The attempt to have me removed and replaced with somebody who had publicly declared she didn't know one speaker's work and was a fan of the other, I don't accept that to be a reasonable request, and I don't think it came from a genuine concern about fairness. The legal threat to suppress the footage of a public intellectual conversation that was contracted and agreed upon in advance. Those things happen. I've named them plainly. Draw your own conclusions. Here's what I keep coming back to 5 years later. That footage, once it was finally released, has been watched by hundreds of thousands of people. The comment section is still active, still ferocious, still generating heat. But buried in those comments are people who say, I came in certain of my position and I left slightly less certain. Not converted, not persuaded, just less certain. Cracks in the wall. This is what these events are for. Not to produce winners or losers, not to validate what the audience already believes, to create the conditions where someone encounters a genuinely different framework of thought and had to actually contend with it. We got there, partially despite everything, the hostile room, behind the scenes chaos, my own inexperience as a host, real moments of genuine exchange happened on that stage. You can see them in the footage. I'll put a link in the description. I don't regret the event. I regret the things that I could have done better. I started this channel to tell stories from inside the event industry. This is one of those Insider Stories, an event that ended up in New York Magazine, that generated legal threats, that sparked a culture war debate that's still running in the comment section today, and that taught me more about the state of public discourse in 2019 than any academic paper on the subject ever could. I made real mistakes, and I hope I told you some of them. I produced something that mattered, that put two genuine, seriously opposed voices in a room and let thousands of people sit with the discomfort of real disagreement in an era where most people's media diet is perfectly curated to confirm everything they already believe. I think that still counts for something. The footage from both these nights is still available at Thinkable, link in the description. Watch it and decide yourself. If you want the entirely unedited version, there is an audio version. If you want more of these, the real stories from inside the events that shaped culture, subscribe. See you in the next one.